I'm so excited for this video. Okay, where do we start? It's like coming back to old friends. Today we're talking about some of the best books I read during my English degree. Hey, it's Megan. Welcome back. It's good to see you. Today, I'm taking a step back in time to tell you about some of the most beautiful books ever written. These are all books I read at the University of Toronto, where I graduated with my English degree. I graduated in 2016, so I kind of had to comb through the archives to remember the details about some of these, but Grandma pulled it together, so here we go. My favorite class during undergrad was actually Canadian fiction, where we read nothing but Canadian prairie writers. Just profound in every way and kind of life-changing, not gonna lie. Very unexpectedly so. Anyway, let's start. Who are we starting with? Late Nights on Air. Oh, even just looking at the cover of this takes me right back. Late Nights on Air by Elizabeth Hay. Thinking about what it felt like to read this book, I just remember the sense of like this melancholy feeling of being in a small, quiet town in the middle of nowhere. The overall vibe of this book was like a chilly autumn morning. That's how I remember it. Very quiet and just a sense of people going about their normal lives and struggling with things like love, meaning, and identity. This book takes place in the summer of 1975 in Yellowknife, and it's basically about a group of characters that work together at a radio station, and one of the characters falls in love with a woman on the air just by hearing her voice, and eventually 4 of them go on a canoe trip into the wilderness, and I think he ends up meeting her and just being completely put off. He fell in love with this woman, and then when he saw her physically, it just like ruined everything for him, and it's just about that dynamic and how icky that is. What else? Okay, let's just read this. This is what I'm talking about. Ready? Hay has a skewering intelligence about the frailties of the human heart. She builds a fresh, erotic, darkly witty, and moving tale, replete with sentences, yes, this line is so true, sentences that stop you dead because of their unexpected wisdoms and startling beauty. Thank you for saying that, publisher, because one thing I remember about this book was the unbelievable sentences. Just so beautiful. Let me see if I have any of them highlighted, bookmarked. Do you ever go through your books from college and see your notes and you're like, so funny. These notes say things like transcendent wilderness, wilderness as sanctuary, reversal of the wilderness concept, beautiful wilderness. It's a lot about the wilderness. I remember there was something with a bear. This book was awesome. Anywho, if you haven't read it and you love beautiful books, beautiful writing, and something that'll just make you feel, Late Nights on Air by Elizabeth Hay. Okay, next I'm going to lump a bunch of books together by this same author because I took an entire seminar on her writing, mostly so that I could take another class with the professor who taught Canadian fiction. So shout out to John O'Connor. Kind of changed my life. But anyway, this is Margaret Lawrence. So let's grab her books. I think I had 4 or 5 of them here. Oh, good to see you all again. Okay, so here are some that I read by Margaret Lawrence. We have The Diviners, A Jest of God, A Bird in the House, and The Stone Angel. Look, there she is. There she is. What a cutie pie. Oh, mercy, why does she have to do things to my heart and hurt it? If you love literary fiction, stream of consciousness writing that's gritty and real, Margaret Lawrence is your gal. The Stone Angel is about an elderly woman. She's 90 and kind of on her way out, and it's all about sort of how she's grappling with that as her son tries to like control her life more and more, and she just wants one more stab at freedom and independence. Beautifully written. I mean, Margaret is like, Miss Lawrence is right in this woman's head. I think I remember learning that when she was writing this book, it was almost like Hagar, the main character, just appeared in her mind and started talking and didn't stop talking until the book was done. And I was like, that's pretty cool. So again, I took a whole class on her. Her books just broke my heart in the best way. Like they all kind of just ache, but it's so good. You know what I mean? Was I okay in university? I don't think so. Definitely not. Anyway, her books made me think about what was important in life, the journey of life, the meaning that small, seemingly insignificant connections can have. Man, just thinking about The Diviners. Oh man, this book is so good. I read this book a couple of times. It's like real life, you know? It's not romanticized. It's not commercialized. It's just right there waiting for you to come along for the ride. So that's Margaret Lawrence. I guess I could tell you a little bit about what the books are about. Okay, right, so A Bird in the House. This one's about Vanessa. Takes place in the 1930s and 40s. And this one's kind of about family, identity, the complexity of human relationships. I mean, come on. A Jest of God. This one, as I think about it, was, I think, a lot about loneliness and kind of unfulfilled desires. Rachel's sort of like kind of a homely gal, but she sort of has this rebellion in her. Like a woman at the time where she was unmarried and without kids, and so it was kind of like, oh, what's wrong with her? But anyway, I think she ends up having an affair with someone who's married and then has to like explore her own sexuality and find her own meaning and identity. Again, a lot of meaning and identity. Great themes. So that's that one. And then The Diviners is about Morag, and it basically walks through her whole life. She grew up, I think starts in like the Great Depression, and then it's just her coming to terms with her kind of traumatic life, her childhood, the relationships she's made, and then she is also a writer, so it's kind of a book about a writer, which I always find interesting. So gets into like artistic expression and identity and storytelling. It kind of uses some different, how do I describe it? I think there are dream sequences in here, and it like flashes forward, flashes back, and I really liked that about it as well. All right, that's Margaret Lawrence. Man, God bless her. May she rest in peace. Now, let's see. Next are a couple of other greats that I read in Canadian fiction. I mean, that class. I also can't believe that I read so many books. This was like a shortened, like a summer class where you don't have as many weeks. And I read like 10 books in 2 months. Oh, those were the days. Look, it still has my little tabs in it. I think I wrote an essay on this because it has an awful lot of tabs and an awful lot of highlights. Like, look at all those notes. Oh, English degrees are the best. Okay, this is As for Me in My House by Sinclair Ross. Painfully good. Oh, and I'm going to talk about Sunshine Sketches of a Little Town. I can never say it. Sunshine Sketches of a Little Town. There we go. By Stephen Leacock. So As for Me in My House, I think it was written in like 1941. This novel is set again in like the Canadian prairies in the 1930s. Basically, it's written through journal entries. This minister and his wife move to this small town and kind of struggle to adjust to like the harsh climate and the particularities of the culture of the town. It's written through her point of view. So it's the wife's point of view, and it's just, oh man. Like, look at this. See that note? Yeah, that sums it up. That's basically the feeling you get the whole time. But it's so good. It's so good. Can you sense a theme in the books that I like? Tell me what that tells you about me. So yeah, a lot of themes of like tension between what's expected of you from your community and what you desire, the roles that you have to play, and just how difficult that can be in the 1930s in rural Saskatchewan. So really good book. It hurts me, but I love it. Okay, and then Sunshine Sketches of a Little Town. This was actually the first book I read in Canadian fiction. This one's a collection of short stories that all take place in this little town. I think it's called Mariposa. And so this one is actually based on towns in Ontario, but it's still kind of a small town vibe. They're kind of satirical, poking fun at like small town life and the community life that goes on there, and just gives you a feeling of like, oh, quirky small town, quirky community. Why do we do things this way? So I guess my professor started us off with a light one and then just smacked us in the face with all of the hurtful, beautiful, painful, tragic ones. So at least there's that. Sunshine Sketches. I feel like all the books I read by Canadian authors just kind of left me with this, that feeling of like life is hard and it might all be meaningless, but we're still here trying to figure it out and making connections with other people who are just trying to figure it out. And we're just questioning and learning and trying to grow. That's what they left me with. Okay, enough of that Canadian fiction class. Now we're going to go to my other Canadian fiction class and look at Life of Pi, which, if you guys didn't know, is written by a Canadian author. There he is, Ian Martel. Oh, wow. This could be the only book you recognize on this list, and that's because it deserves to be recognized. It's really good. They all deserve it. So I didn't mean that. You all deserve it. But this one's good. Anyway, this novel tells the story of Pi. He's a young Indian boy. He survives a shipwreck, and he ends up stranded on the Pacific Ocean in like a lifeboat with a tiger that he names Richard. Richard Parker. And so it's basically about how they struggle to survive, and Pi reflects on his life, his faith, things like that. I remember a lot of the reason why I loved this book was for the vivid details. I remember learning that when your narrator wants you to believe that they know what they're talking about and they're telling you a true story, they're going to give you really good details. And so when Pi was on the boat, he was describing everything in such detail that you're like, oh, this kid was actually there. Was he actually there? Were things exactly how he said? I don't know. There's a great twist at the end, which is why this book landed on my list of favorite books from university. Gosh, I love a twist. Just absolutely beautifully written, engaging. I mean, they're floating in the ocean for so many pages. Like, how do you make that engaging? So good. Okay, then I took a class called Contemporary British Fiction? Maybe it was Modern Canadian Writers and Contemporary British Fiction. I don't remember. As I said, it was a while ago that I graduated. So we read this in my British literature, contemporary, whatever class. The Remains of the Day. If you haven't read anything by Kazuo Ishiguro, man, sorry in advance. You really should. Also, yes, that's a Japanese name and he's Japanese, but he's British also. But I just remember learning about the subtle ways that the narrator could be misleading us without us knowing it. And I just was like, that is so cool. The voice and character development in this is just so good, and it's not long either. So bonus points. Okay, I should tell you what this one's about. This was written in 1988. Written in 1988. It's set just after World War II in England, and it's told from the perspective of a butler. He spent his whole life as a butler to this wealthy guy. I think he might be a lord. And so basically throughout the whole book, he's reflecting on his life, he's reflecting on service, and he's kind of reflecting on the downfall of the aristocracy and that whole system of using butlers and maids and all of that. It goes into his own sacrifices and his own experience, and that's where it gets to be like, is he telling us the truth or is he not? That's one thing I love about a first-person narrator, is that you just don't know if what they're saying is true. So I really liked the intrigue and mystery in that, and it's one of my favorites. There you have it. You know what? I didn't put this one in my notes, but we have to talk about it. Kindred! I read this in my American fiction class. We all know that Octavia Butler is a gem. Kindred is about a woman who goes back in time and becomes a slave, and so it kind of walks through her experience with that. Wow, what else can I say about it? I gotta read this again. I love a time travel motif, and I love a commentary on history and a fictionalization of history if it's done well, so would definitely recommend Kindred. Honorable mention, Who Has Seen the Wind by W.O. Mitchell. Maybe I should just read you the first line, and that'll tell you all that you need to know. Oh my gosh, I just got like flutters in my heart after looking at the first few words. Okay, ready? This is the first line of this book. Here was the least common denominator of nature, the skeleton requirements simply of land and sky, Saskatchewan prairie. Come on. It lay wide around the town, stretching tan to the far line of the sky, clumped with low buckbrush and wild rose bushes, shimmering under the late June sun and waiting for the unfailing visitation of wind, gentle at first, barely stroking the long grasses and giving them life. Later, a long, hot gusting that would lift the black topsoil and pile it in barrow pits along the roads or in deep banks against the fences. Oh, I mean, come on. Wow, that's a lot of circling and underlining. Honorable mention. All right, finally, now that I've gotten off track, departing again from Canadian authors, this one was called Victorian realist novels, and this was my favorite book. It might also honestly have been the only book I read all the way through in that class. Oops. And that's The Tenant of Wildfell Hall by Anne Bronte. I think this is Anne Bronte's only novel. I'm pretty sure. She wrote this in 1848, and basically it tells the story of Helen. Helen is a young widow. She moves into Wildfell Hall, and it's just sort of about her adjustment to the town that she's in. I want to say she inherited this place, but I could be wrong. She might have just moved there with her son, and it was abandoned before that. I'm not sure. Anyway, she lives there. She's a widow, but she has a kid, so the town kind of looks down on her. There's this younger man that falls in love with her, but Helen is really secretive about her past, and eventually, I think, through like letters and maybe some journal entries, it comes to light that she was with a really bad guy. Her husband was not great, and so it's all about the mystery of her past and what she reveals. What wrecked me about this book and why I love it and it's one of my favorites is it was just so relatable. This book was written in the 1840s, but I was like, these characters are feeling the exact same things that I can empathize so easily with them. And this wasn't anything new to me. I mean, I've read older texts like the Bible and had a similar experience, a similar thought. But I just remember reading about Helen's loneliness and her longingness to be loved. And I was like, man, so relatable, so accurate, like so just truthful to the human experience. You know, we're not all that different, even 200 years later. And honestly, that is why people need to read old books. We need to read old books because we all think our ideas and our feelings are new and that no one's ever gone through this before, and it's just not true. So, yeah. Tenant of Wildfell Hall, highly recommend. Her sisters always get so much more of the spotlight, but Anne killed it with this one. So, honestly, in and out of university, when I lived in Canada, I read so many weird, incredible, quirky, interesting, gut-wrenching books, from commercial novels to out there literary novels. I was truly blessed to be able to do this English degree. And now I'm really missing the days when I could just spend 5 to 10 hours every day reading, thinking about reading and literature, taking classes and writing essays. Oh man, so good. But we must press on. If you've read a book lately that just kind of broke your heart in the best way, do share. Clearly, that's what I go for. Bonus points if it's a little bit obscure. Because sometimes, honestly, the books no one's heard of are the best ones. Sometimes they're the worst ones. If you want to write a book one day that makes it onto my list of favorite books, definitely check out my playlist on starting a writing project. If you liked this video, it really helps my channel if you can like, comment, or subscribe. And as always, I will see you next time. Thanks for watching. Bye.